My name is Jim Plitz. I am an attorney and a partner at the law firm of Morris Hall. All we do is estate planning. So we deal with wills and trusts and just getting people legally ready for one of the two inevitabilities in life. What are the two inevitabilities?
Death and taxes.
Death and taxes, exactly.
And birth.
Could happen. But we all know, and even tax, in 2018, even the taxes have gone way down. Not as many people are going to be paying taxes, and especially they're not going to be paying death taxes. Pretty much nobody will be paying death taxes unless your name is Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Warren Buffett. So really, we're down to one inevitability, is death. And are we planned? Are we planned? So my job is to legally plan with a will or a trust, so we know that whatever you guys want to have happen, who's in charge, and then who gets your stuff is in a legal document, so when you're not here to let us know, we have something to rely on. And as we were talking in the pre-show, it's all about the conversation. And today we have Gail Rubin, the doyen of death, who's going to talk today on ethical wills. So this isn't what we would normally think of as a last will and testament. That is my job. An ethical will is more in line with that conversation. What are you leaving in terms of you, your legacy, your wisdom? So with that, I am going to turn the floor over to Gail Rubin.
Thank you, Jim. To everything, there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. Yes. Some of you may hear the refrain from the song, "Turn, Turn, Turn." Did that kind of resonate in your mind when you heard that? Yes, the Byrds, the American folk rock group The Byrds, made that a hit in 1965. But the song was actually written by Pete Seeger in the 1950s. And he actually didn't like the Byrds version, I understand.
Actually, it was in the Bible long before him.
Well, you're stealing my thunder, man. In fact, those words are thousands of years old from the book of Ecclesiastes. And it was the beginning of chapter 3 of the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is an amazing way for us to consider our life and our death, and a starting point for our ethical wills. What is an ethical will? So, you did ask that question. In days of yore, when people did their last will and testament, the will part is what Jim took care of, the dissemination of your property. The testament is your ethical will, where you testify as to what you found in this lifetime to be good and true and worth passing along. There are synagogues that will have a program where the book of Ecclesiastes is studied and ethical wills are written. However, you have to be at least 50 years old to participate in the program, because it's considered you're not an elder of the congregation until you turn 50, and then maybe you've got some life wisdom to share with people.
Nobody here is 50.
You're way past 50.
Way past.
So what they would do in this program at synagogues is spend a few weeks reading the book of Ecclesiastes, which is not a huge book. It's only got 12 chapters, but it has a wealth of wisdom contained in it. And after reading and discussing Ecclesiastes, these individuals would write their ethical wills and actually read them aloud at a special Sabbath service around the holiday of Sukkot, which is the harvest festival. So when traditionally we were harvesting the grains and the fruits of our labor, this is also an opportunity in our modern day and age when maybe we're not toiling in the garden out under the sun as much as our ancestors were, but we can harvest the fruits of our wisdom and present them to our loved ones in the congregation.
How do you spell Ecclesiastes?
Oh, slowly.
E-C-C.
A little louder.
E-C-C. L-E. S as in Sam. I-A. S as in Sam. T as in Tom. E-S as in Sam.
Thank you.
So Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon in his later years. And reading Ecclesiastes, you'll see a number of phrases that sound very familiar. The sun also rises.
Oh.
Eat, drink, and be merry. And other phrases such as, there is nothing new under the sun. Now, I recently went to the National Speakers Association convention. I am a professional speaker, and as often happens when I travel, I have sleepless nights in the hotel. And what do I do on this particular trip? But I open the drawer in the nightstand and find the Gideon's Bible. I've had this from a previous trip, but they do encourage you to take these home and, benefit from their wisdom. And I read the book of Ecclesiastes. And I was struck by these recurring themes of 3 phrases. The first one being toiling under the sun, that our lives are full of toil and work under the sun. And I happened to meet a rabbi the next day at a reception, and this was definitely a religious rabbi. He had the yarmulke on, a skull cap, and the really religious folks have fringes sticking out from under their shirts. It's called tzitzit. It's meant to remind us to be doing the 613 mitzvot in the Bible. Mitzvot are good deeds that one should do. Actually, there are do's and there are don'ts. There are, believe it or not, 284 do's and 635 don'ts. So,
There's actually a list of those?
well, it's sprinkled throughout the Bible, the Old Testament.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a list of those.
I bet you could get a list on the internet. Maybe I'll pull that up and make that available. Yeah.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
No, it's okay. So when I met this rabbi, and I told him I had been up the night before reading Ecclesiastes, and that I was struck by this phrase about toiling under the sun, he said, but the real work is done in the dark. Internally, how we process what we've been doing in our toiling under the sun. So I thought that was very deep and a wonderful reason to look at our lives with the help of Ecclesiastes to begin writing our ethical wills. Another theme that comes up a lot in Ecclesiastes is vanity and a grasping after the wind. In fact, the second line in Ecclesiastes is vanity of vanities. All is vanity. So our egos are very involved with our work under the sun. But that work does not endure. It's grasping after the wind. And I want to read you a couple of passages in the second chapter where King Solomon is talking about everything he's done in his life and how accomplished he is, and yet how he feels about it now that he's toward the end of his days. I made my works great. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. So he's talking about, he's a builder, he's a planter, he's setting up these systems to make sure that everything keeps growing. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So he was a rich man. He managed people. He had great possessions. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. Very important point. He still had his wits about him at the end of his days. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. And this was my reward from all my labor. So he enjoyed his life. He spent his money. He was having a good old time. Whatever he saw that gave him pleasure, he was on it. And then this last line, then I looked on all the works that my hands had done and on the labor in which I had toiled. And indeed, all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. Profit, P-R-O-F-I-T. So here's a man who's had all these achievements. He's made all this money. He set up all these buildings and influenced so much and achieved so much. And yet here at the end of his days, what's it all worth? Now, the phrase about toiling under the sun appears in Ecclesiastes 22 times. The phrase about vanity and grasping after the wind appears 33 times throughout all 12 chapters. The third theme that emerges is wisdom. And he talks about wisdom and foolishness 31 times throughout these 12 chapters. The idea is that wisdom is the only thing that endures, that we can pass along to others. And this is where the ethical will comes in. I have in my hand a tight framed 12 things to remember. My father gave this to myself and my 3 brothers when we were teenagers, young adults. It was in the 1970s. And I never asked my dad, where did you get these 12 things to remember from? And because I was speaking to you today, I asked him. And he said he had seen this in a mom and pop restaurant in Washington, D.C., which is where I grew up. And he was so struck by this, he wrote it down for his own edification. And then decided that this is a good thing to type up and give to the kids. So here are the 12 things to remember that my father has given to me and my brothers. Number 1, the virtue of patience. Number 2, the success of perseverance. The obligation of duty. The joy of originating. The improvement of talent. The worth of character. The wisdom of economy. The value of time. The pleasure of results. The power of kindness. The dignity of simplicity. And the influence of example. So I've had this in my office or on my desk for decades now, and it has influenced my life, and I am so blessed that my dad thought enough of these words and of his children to pass these words along to us when we were still young. So this is a way that one could present one's ethical will. It's an ethical will in its most simplest form, but you could expand upon it and write paragraphs or at least a few sentences about each. But there is a way that you could write your own ethical will if you didn't want to just make a list of 12 things to do like this mom and pop restaurant couple did that so influenced my dad. Here are a list of topics and questions that you could use for a starting point. Your family and friends. What are your feelings about your nearest and dearest that you might write down? Do you have special words of wisdom or encouragement for specific loved ones that you might want to share? Life lessons that you've learned in love, in work, in your experiences and challenges and travels, your relationships, your spirituality. You could go on and on, but what life lessons have you learned? What are your favorites and why? So that could be favorite people, places, pets, experiences, music, art, food, objects. You could go on and on. Wealth and charity. So rather than just the splitting up of the assets, maybe talk a bit about the meaning of money to you, what it brings you, thoughts on saving or investing or donating to worthy causes. Your greatest whatever, your greatest joy, your greatest ideas, your greatest actions, achievements, and why you regard these things as the greatest. You might talk about your worst moments, your worst challenges, your worst relationships, losses, sorrows, and what you learn from those experiences as well. And
This is the ethical will.
this is the ethical will speech.
Hi, Aurelia.
Come on.
Come on down. And regret. If you could live your life over again, what would you do differently? Now, if you're interested, I've passed out drawing slips, and you can, if you have email and would like to get in PDF, that you could download these 12 things to remember and this list of suggestions for getting started. Write it on the drawing slip, and we'll do a drawing at the end of our presentation today. And you could win the 4 DVD set of A Good Goodbye, which is a TV interview series I did. And Jim was featured in the legal section. There are 30 minutes each, 25 minutes of conversation about what you need to know before you go. So I hope you'll fill out your information and we can see who gets that. So another idea for you to consider to use for an ethical will is that it could be read at your funeral or memorial service. That this is one way you could be dispensing your wisdom by writing out your thoughts and giving your ethical will to a loved one to hold on to for whenever that day comes. Or if you really want to get creative, you could do a video. I mean, many of our smartphones have lovely built-in cameras, and you could record yourself speaking into the camera, sharing your words of wisdom, either reading your ethical will or just talk into the camera. And who knows, it might go viral on YouTube. So to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time to be born and a time to die, and there's nothing new under the sun. But while we're here, let's eat, drink, and be merry, and make the most of our days toiling under the sun. But take some time while we're still here to look within and process that work in the dark that helps us harvest the wisdom that we learn as we live our lives. And write your ethical will while you still can, and share your wisdom with the world.